First wonder 1. The stars above Earth burned cold and distant, indifferent to the storm gathering in the halls of power below. On the surface, cities hummed with quiet routine. Cars rolled down wet streets, children laughed in schoolyards, and farmers checked their fields under pale morning light. But deep beneath Geneva, in a reinforced chamber lined with steel and silence, the fate of humanity was being decided. President Daniel Brooks stood at the head of the long table, his hands resting on its smooth surface. His face was tired, but his eyes were sharp. Around him sat the leaders of Earth's United Nations, men and women from every continent, their expressions tight with worry. On the wall screen before them, a message flickered in stark white text against a black background. It had arrived 3 hours ago from the edge of known space, carried by a sleek silver courier drone that had dropped out of warp near Jupiter. The message was not a request. It was an order. "You have 30 standard cycles to comply," the translated words read. "Dismantle all military installations beyond Earth orbit. Surrender control of your outer colonies. Accept quarantine protocols. Failure to obey will result in enforcement by the Galactic Council peacekeeping fleet." No signatures. No pleasantries. Just cold final words from a body that had never once asked Earth's opinion on anything. Daniel exhaled slowly. "They think we'll fold," he said, his voice low but steady. "Like we're just another backwater species to be managed." Across the table, General Lisa Grant leaned forward. Her uniform was crisp, her dark hair pulled back in a tight bun. She had spent the last 20 years studying alien tactics, reverse engineering captured tech, and training the next generation of pilots. "They don't understand us," she said. "They saw us bleed during the Krell War. They think that made us weak." "It made us smarter," Daniel replied. Outside, the sun climbed higher, casting long shadows through the narrow windows of the underground complex. Above, in orbit, things were already moving, hidden in the craters of the moon, inside hollowed-out asteroids near Mars, and tucked into the rings of Saturn. Human engineers worked in silence. They weren't building cities or research stations. They were building weapons, quiet, precise, and terrifyingly effective. One such place was Lunar Base Theta 7, buried under 300 meters of regolith on the far side of the moon. There, Kyle Dawson wiped grease from his hands and stared at the skeletal frame of a new stealth frigate. It had no running lights, no visible thrusters, and a hull coated in a matte black material that absorbed 99.8% of sensor emissions. He'd helped design its drive system, a hybrid of human engineering and salvaged Krell phase-shifting tech. "They really think we're just going to roll over?" Kyle asked, tossing his rag onto a nearby crate. His teammate, a young engineer named Priya Mehta, didn't look up from her console. "The Council's been calling us late bloomers for years. To them, we're children playing with fire." "Well, kids burn things too," Kyle muttered. Back on Earth, the public didn't know about the ultimatum yet. The government had kept it secret, buying time. But rumors were spreading. On news feeds and street corners, people whispered about strange ship movements near the asteroid belt, about blackouts in deep space comms, about the sudden recall of all civilian vessels beyond Mars orbit. In Houston, Dr. Megan Cole reviewed data streams in a dimly lit lab. Her team had spent the last 5 years perfecting something the military called temporal shielding, a field that bent local time just enough to make human ships appear slower to enemy sensors while moving at full speed. It wasn't time travel. It was deception refined to an art, and it was ready. She tapped a key, and a simulation played out on her screen. A human frigate slipping past a simulated council patrol, undetected, then striking with surgical precision before vanishing again. She smiled faintly. They had been preparing for this moment longer than the Council had been watching them. Meanwhile, aboard the Council's flagship Sovereign Will, orbiting a neutral station near Proxima Centauri, Admiral Zorath of the Velnari hegemony reviewed Earth's file with mild amusement. His species had ruled the galaxy for millennia. They had tamed supernovas, rewritten genetic codes, and pacified 100 rebellious worlds. Earth was a footnote, a rocky world that had barely survived its first real war. "Primitive," he said aloud, his voice clicking through multiple vocal cords. "Emotional, unpredictable." His aide, a slender being with iridescent skin, bowed slightly. "Shall we prepare the fleet, Admiral?" "Yes," Zorath replied. "Send the full armada. Let them see the might of the Council. A show of force will be enough." They will surrender before the first shot is fired. He did not know that Earth had already fired the first shot. In silence, in shadow, in preparation. On Earth, President Brooks finally gave the order, not for war, not yet, but for readiness. All units go to Iron Veil Protocol, he said into the secure comm. Across the solar system, lights blinked green in hidden bunkers. Pilots suited up. Engineers locked down non-essential systems. Mothers kissed their children goodbye without saying why. Fathers checked old rifles stored in basements just in case. The 30-cycle countdown had begun. The Galactic Council expected fear. They expected begging. They expected humanity to kneel. What they did not expect was silence, and in that silence, Earth sharpened its teeth high above the planet. In geosynchronous orbit, a single satellite rotated slowly. Its lens pointed not at Earth, but at the stars. It carried no weapons, only sensors and a powerful transmitter. Its job was simple: watch, listen, and when the time came, send one message to every human outpost, every ship, every soldier. That message had not been sent yet, but it would be. And when it was, the galaxy would learn that humanity did not forget.
Humanity did not forgive.
And humanity never ever surrendered. The stars watched. The Council waited. And Earth prepared to show them what happened when you pushed a cornered animal too far. The Council fleet arrived at the edge of the solar system like a storm rolling in from deep space. Hundreds of ships, sleek and silver, their hulls shimmering with energy shields, formed a perfect wedge aimed straight at Earth. At their center floated the Sovereign Will, Admiral Zorath's command vessel, twice the size of anything humanity had ever built. Its weapons could crack a moon in half. Its sensors could count the heartbeats of every living thing on a planet from orbit. Zorath stood on the command deck, his many eyes fixed on the starfield ahead. Earth was just a pale blue dot now, but soon it would be his to command. He had given them 30 cycles. They had used every one of them and done nothing. No surrender, no response. Just silence. That silence annoyed him. It felt like disrespect. Hail the planet, he ordered. A junior officer tapped at a console. No response, Admiral. All civilian and military channels are dark. Zorath clicked his mandibles in irritation. Then we make them listen. He gave the order to move forward. The fleet advanced, engines humming with power, weapons charging. They passed the orbit of Neptune, then Uranus, then Saturn. Still no sign of human resistance. No patrols. No warning shots, nothing. They've abandoned their outer defenses, Zorath said, satisfied. They know they cannot win. But he was wrong. Hidden in the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter, thousands of small, dark objects waited. They looked like space junk, old satellites, broken probes, chunks of rock. But inside each one pulsed a tiny fusion core, a guidance chip, and a warhead packed with shaped plasma. These were drone mines built over years in secret, placed with care and left to sleep until needed. Aboard Lunar Base Theta 7, Kyle Dawson watched the Council fleet on his screen. His hands hovered over the controls. He wasn't nervous. He was ready. Command, this is Theta 7, he said into the comm. Fleet has crossed the trigger line. Authorize activation. A pause. Then a calm voice replied. Authorization granted. Execute Iron Veil Phase 1. Kyle took a breath and pressed the button. Across the asteroid belt, the mines woke up. At first, nothing seemed to happen. Then, one by one, they blinked to life. Their thrusters fired in perfect sync, adjusting position with eerie precision. The Council sensors finally noticed them, but too late. Before their operators could react, the mines detonated, not all at once. Not randomly. They exploded in a wave like a ripple moving through water. Each blast timed to overload the next ship's shields just as they tried to reinforce them. The chain reaction was devastating. A Krell-class destroyer vanished in a flash of white fire. A Velnari cruiser spun out of control, its hull torn open like paper. Smaller ships were simply erased. The Sovereign Will's shields flared as shockwaves hit it from all sides. Alarms blared across the command deck. What is this? Zorath roared. Where did these weapons come from? No one answered, because now something else was happening. From the dark side of the moon, 3 human frigates dropped out of stealth mode. They were small, barely a tenth the size of the smallest Council ship, but fast. Their hulls were black as night, their engines nearly silent. On board, Captain Ryan Holt gripped his chair as his ship shot forward. Launch the rods, he said. From hidden bays along the frigate's undersides, hundreds of tungsten rods, each 10 meters long and sharpened to a needlepoint, were released. They carried explosivos. They didn't need any. Accelerated by magnetic rails and guided by AI, they slammed into the weakened council ships at near relativistic speeds. One rod punched clean through a command bridge. Another tore through an engine core, triggering a secondary explosion that took out 2 nearby vessels. The council fleet, once proud and orderly, was now chaos. Zorath stared at the view screen in disbelief. This is impossible. Their technology is centuries behind ours. But it wasn't about technology. It was about strategy. Humanity had studied the council for decades. They knew how their shields recharged, how their formations moved, how their crews thought. And they had built weapons not to match the council, but to break them. Back on Earth, President Brooks watched the battle unfold in real time. The feed came from drones, satellites, and the frigates themselves. He didn't cheer. He didn't smile. He just nodded. They thought we'd beg, he said quietly. Instead, we taught them a lesson. In Houston, Dr. Megan Cole monitored the temporal shielding systems on the frigates. So far, they were working perfectly. To the council sensors, the human ships appeared to move slower than they actually were, just enough to throw off targeting solutions. By the time the aliens corrected, the frigates had already struck and vanished back into the shadows. On the bridge of the Sovereign Will, Zorath finally understood. This wasn't a battle. It was an ambush, and his fleet had walked right into it. Full retreat, he ordered, his voice tight with fury and fear. All ships fall back to Neptune orbit. But retreat was harder than he thought. Human drones harried the damaged ships, picking off stragglers. Mines still floated in the debris field, waiting for careless pilots. And the frigates, those ghostly black hunters, kept appearing where they shouldn't, striking fast and disappearing again. By the time the surviving council ships limped past Uranus, half the fleet was gone. The Sovereign Will itself was scarred, its once gleaming hull blackened and cracked. Zorath sat in silence, his pride shattered. On Earth, the people still didn't know what had happened. The government kept the news quiet. But in the military channels, a new mood spread. Not triumph, not yet, but resolve. Captain Holt's voice came over the secure fleet net. Phase 1 complete. No human losses. A chorus of quiet acknowledgments followed. In Geneva, General Lisa Grant turned to President Brooks. They'll be back. And next time they'll bring more. Brooks nodded. Then we'll be ready. High above, the stars watched as the last of the council ships vanished into warp. The solar system fell quiet again. But this silence was different. It wasn't the silence of fear. It was the silence of a predator waiting. Earth had drawn first blood. And the galaxy had just learned that humanity didn't fight fair. They fought to win. After the battle, Earth went quiet. Not the nervous silence of before, but a deeper, heavier quiet. The kind that comes after a storm has passed, but the ground is still wet with rain. The council fleet had fled, broken and bleeding, leaving behind wreckage that drifted like ghost ships among the asteroids. Humanity did not chase them. They did not broadcast victory speeches or send taunting messages across the stars. They simply vanished. From orbit, Earth looked empty. The bright lights of orbital stations winked out. The bustling traffic between Luna and Mars stopped. Even the deep space telescopes went dark. To any observer, alien or human, it seemed as if Earth had given up. As if the brief flash of resistance had been a final, desperate gasp before surrender. But beneath the surface, in hidden bunkers and shielded labs, work continued. President Daniel Brooks walked through the underground command center beneath Geneva, his footsteps echoing softly on the metal floor. Maps of the solar system covered the walls, marked with red lines and symbols only a few people understood. He stopped before a large screen showing real-time feeds from the outer colonies. Mars, Ceres, Titan, all appeared abandoned. Buildings stood empty. Vehicles sat motionless. But Brooks knew better. Every colonist had been moved, some to underground shelters, others to hidden ships waiting in the dark. Nothing had been left behind that could help the enemy. They think we're hiding, Brooks said to General Lisa Grant, who walked beside him. They think we're beaten, she replied. That's even better. On Xylos Prime, the capital world of the Galactic Council, panic had taken root. The great domed halls that once echoed with confident decrees now buzzed with fear. Council members from a dozen species argued in hushed, urgent tones. How could a primitive species like humanity have done this? Where did they get such weapons? Why had their intelligence failed so badly? Admiral Zorath, once proud and certain, now sat in disgrace. His fleet had been humiliated. His reputation was ash, but the Council could not afford to look weak. If word spread that Earth had defeated them, other species might rise up too. Revolts could spread like wildfire across the galaxy, so they made a decision, not to negotiate, not to reconsider, but to crush Earth completely. A new armada began to form, bigger than the last, stronger. Ships poured in from every corner of Council space, warriors from the iron-skinned Dravik clans, energy weavers from the Lumini conquered, and bio-titans from the fungal hive worlds of Mycalor. This would not be a peacekeeping mission. It would be an extermination. Back on Earth, they knew it was coming. In a quiet lab in Houston, Dr. Megan Cole adjusted the final settings on the temporal dilation field generator. The device was no larger than a refrigerator, but it held the key to everything. When activated, it bent local spacetime just enough to make a ship appear slower to outside sensors while moving at full speed. It wasn't perfect, only worked for short bursts, drained massive power, and gave pilots terrible headaches. But it worked. And against an enemy that relied on predictive targeting, even a half-second delay could mean survival. She ran one last test. On the screen, a simulated human frigate slipped past 3 enemy destroyers, fired its payload, and vanished before the first shot could lock on. She smiled. "Ready?" she whispered. On the moon, Kyle Dawson helped load the last of the stealth drones into the hidden hangar. These weren't mines. They were spies. Tiny, silent craft that could latch onto enemy hulls and feed back data for weeks. Some carried micro-warheads. Others just watched and listened. Every piece of intel mattered. Captain Ryan Holt stood on the bridge of the Aegikon, humanity's newest and most advanced warship. It wasn't the biggest. It wasn't the flashiest, but it was smart. Its AI could learn enemy patterns in real time. Its armor could shift density to absorb different kinds of fire. And its crew, handpicked from the best pilots, engineers, and tacticians Earth had, knew they might not come back, but they didn't care. They had seen what the Council did to worlds that resisted. They had studied the ruins of the Krell homeworld, glassed from orbit as a lesson. They knew surrender meant extinction. So they prepared. While the galaxy watched Earth go dark, humanity was not hiding. They were setting a trap. The Council scouts returned first, small, fast ships sent to confirm Earth's weakness. They scanned the surface, found empty cities, detected no military signals, reported back that Earth was defenseless. The Council believed them. They did not see the weapons buried under the ice of Europa. They did not detect the drone swarms folded inside hollowed-out comets near Neptune. They did not know that every abandoned colony base had been rigged with delayed charges, ready to turn into shrapnel the moment an alien boot touched the floor, and they had no idea about Project Iron Veil's final phase. In Geneva, President Brooks met with his War Council one last time. No speeches, no grand plans, just a simple question. Are we ready? General Grant nodded. Every ship, every soldier, every scientist, we're ready. Brooks looked at the faces around the table, tired, determined, human. Then let them come, he said. Let them see what happens when you give us time to prepare. Above, the stars remained silent. But in the void between worlds, something stirred. The Council Armada gathered, a wall of metal and fire stretching across light years. They moved with grim purpose, certain this time that Earth would fall. They did not know that Earth had stopped falling a long time ago. They did not know that while they planned their victory parade, humanity was sharpening its knives, and they did not know that the silence they mistook for fear was actually the sound of 1,000 triggers being pulled back. Waiting for the right moment to fire, the galaxy held its breath. Earth did not. The Council Armada arrived not with warning but with certainty. Thousands of ships filled the space around Earth, a wall of metal and light that blotted out the stars. Their weapons hummed with power. Their shields glowed like living things. At their head flew the new flagship, the Eternal Edict, larger and stronger than the Sovereign Will had ever been. This time there would be no mistakes. This time Earth would burn. Admiral Zorath was gone, replaced by High Marshal Vexus, a towering Dravik warrior with armor fused to her bones and eyes that had never known mercy. She stood on the command deck, watching Earth grow larger on the view screen. It looked small, fragile, defenseless, just as the scouts had reported. "Begin orbital scan," she ordered. Her officers obeyed. Sensors swept the planet, the moon, the nearby asteroids. Nothing. No energy signatures. No ship movements. No signals of any kind. Even the orbital platforms that once circled Earth were gone, either dismantled or drifted into the void. "She is ours," Vexus said. "Prepare landing parties. We will take their capital within the hour." But as the first dropships launched from the Eternal Edict, something changed. From the dark reaches of the Oort cloud, far beyond Pluto, human dreadnoughts dropped out of warp. They came silently, their hulls wrapped in phase-shifting armor that bent light and confused sensors. To the Council scanners they appeared as flickers, ghosts that vanished the moment they were spotted. Fleet Commander Eric Shaw sat in the command chair of the Aegis, his hands steady, his voice calm. "All ships execute Iron Veil Final." Across the solar system, humanity struck. First came the neural disruption pulses, waves of energy tuned to the unique bioelectric frequencies of Council species. The pulses didn't damage ships. They attacked the crews. Velnari pilots screamed as their multi-brain systems short-circuited. Drivik warriors collapsed as their neural implants overloaded. Lumini energy weavers lost control of their own bodies. Within seconds, half the Council fleet was blind, deaf, and paralyzed. Then the kinetic rods fell, not from orbit, not from the moon, but from hidden launchers buried deep in the ice of Europa and Ganymede. Thousands of tungsten spears shot into space, guided by AI that had studied Council ship layouts for years. They struck engine cores, bridge viewports, shield generators, precise, relentless, unstoppable. The Eternal Edict rocked as 3 rods punched through its forward shields. Alarms blared. Fires broke out in the lower decks. Vexus roared in fury, trying to regain control, but it was too late. From the asteroid belt, drone swarms emerged. Tiny, fast, and deadly. They latched onto enemy hulls, drilling through armor and planting microcharges that detonated inside vital systems. One by one, Council ships went dark, their lights flickering out like dying stars. On Earth's surface, the final surprise activated. What the Council thought were abandoned cities were actually traps. As dropships entered the atmosphere, hidden defense platforms rose from disguised silos in the deserts, mountains, and ocean floors. These were not old missile launchers. They were railgun arrays powered by fusion cores, firing slugs at speeds that turned air to plasma. The first wave of dropships never reached the ground. They were shredded mid-air, burning up like meteors. Vexus stared at the chaos on her screen. Her fleet was falling apart. Ships were turning on each other. Their AI systems, corrupted by human viruses, slipped in through captured communication protocols. Crews were panicking. Orders were ignored. The mighty armada was becoming a graveyard. "Retreat," she finally growled. "All ships retreat." But escape was not an option. Human frigates, led by Captain Ryan Holt, darted through the wreckage, cutting off escape routes. Their temporal shielding made them nearly impossible to target. They fired not to destroy, but to disable, knocking out engines, frying comms, leaving ships stranded. In orbit, the Aegis faced the Eternal Edict alone. Shaw didn't waste energy on speeches. He simply gave the order: fire the main battery. A single beam of compressed plasma lanced out from the Aegis, striking the flagship's bridge. The blast didn't tear the ship apart. It pierced it like a needle through skin, vaporizing the command deck in an instant. Vexus was gone before she could scream. The rest of the Council fleet broke. Some ships tried to jump to warp, but human minds had already seeded the jump points. Others surrendered, powering down and broadcasting distress calls. A few fought to the end, but they were outnumbered, outmaneuvered, and outthought. Within hours, it was over. The solar system was quiet again, but this time it was the quiet of victory. Debris floated where great ships had been. Survivors in escape pods sent out weak signals. Human rescue teams moved among them, not with cruelty but with cold efficiency. Prisoners would be held. Intelligence would be gathered. Lessons would be learned. On Earth, President Brooks watched the final reports come in. No cities had been lost. No colonies destroyed. Human casualties were light, mostly engineers and pilots who had known the risks. General Lisa Grant stood beside him. "They'll never underestimate us again," Brooks nodded. "Good. In Houston, Dr. Megan Cole shut down the temporal field generator. It had worked better than anyone hoped. In lunar orbit, Kyle Dawson helped guide a damaged frigate to a safe landing. On the bridge of the Aegis, Eric Shaw looked out at the stars and felt no joy, only relief. Humanity had not wanted this war. But they had won it, not with brute force but with patience, cunning, and the will to do whatever it took to survive. The Council had come to enforce their rule. They left with a lesson burned into their bones, and Earth, silent no longer, stood ready for whatever came next. The silence that followed was deeper than any before. Not the silence of fear nor the silence of hiding, but the silence of a world that had spoken and been heard. Across the galaxy, news of the Council's defeat spread like wildfire. Species that had lived under the Council's rule for centuries whispered in the dark, daring to hope for the first time. Trade routes froze. Diplomatic envoys canceled meetings. Even the great warlords of the Outer Rim paused, watching Earth with new eyes. On Xylos Prime, the heart of the Galactic Council, chaos reigned. The Grand Chamber where laws were once made now echoed with shouts and accusations. Council members from a dozen worlds demanded answers. How could this have happened? Who was to blame? Some called for another war. Others begged for peace. But no one dared suggest another attack on Earth. The memory of the shattered armada was too fresh, too painful. High Marshal Vexus was gone. Admiral Zorath was disgraced. And the mighty Eternal Edict, once a symbol of unstoppable power, was now a ghost story told in hushed tones among young cadets. The Council had not just lost a battle. It had lost its aura of invincibility, and without that its authority began to crumble. Earth did not gloat. It did not send triumphant broadcasts or demand tribute. Instead, President Daniel Brooks waited. He knew the galaxy was watching. He knew they expected rage or arrogance or vengeance, but humanity had never fought for conquest. They had fought to be left alone. Then, on the 7th day after the battle, Brooks sent a single message. It was not encrypted. It was not hidden. It was broadcast on every open channel in every major language of the galaxy, simple and clear. We do not seek war. We do not seek empire, but we will not be ruled. Respect our sovereignty, or face consequences beyond your comprehension. The words were short, but they carried the weight of fire, steel, and sacrifice. Species that had once mocked Earth as primitive now listened with respect. Neutral worlds that had stayed silent during the conflict began sending quiet signals. Requests for trade, for dialogue, for understanding. One by one, delegations arrived. First came the Cathari, a peaceful species of plant-based beings who had long opposed the Council's harsh policies. They landed on Mars, not Earth, as a sign of respect and asked only to talk. Then came the Rovans, former mercenaries who had fought for the Council, but now saw a new future. They offered their services, not as soldiers but as protectors of the new balance. Even some former enemies reached out. A lone Velnari scientist, exiled for questioning the Council's actions, sent a data packet filled with technical schematics, gifts of knowledge, not weapons. It was a small gesture, but it meant everything. Back on Earth, life slowly returned to normal. Children played in parks under clear skies. Farmers planted new crops. Factories that had built weapons now turned to rebuilding what had been hidden away. The orbital stations lit up again. Their lights twinkling like stars returned to the night. In Geneva, President Brooks met with his advisors. The war was over, but the work had just begun. Humanity could not stand alone forever. They needed allies. They needed rules that protected the weak, not just the strong. And they needed a voice in the galaxy that could not be ignored. General Lisa Grant oversaw the disarmament of hidden weapons. Not all, but enough to show good faith. Drone mines were deactivated. Stealth frigates were brought into open docks for inspection. It was a risk, but a calculated one. Trust had to start somewhere. In Houston, Dr. Megan Cole began sharing select pieces of human research, medical advances, clean energy designs, even agricultural techniques, with the new delegations. Not as charity, but as partnership. She believed science could heal what war had broken. On the bridge of the Aegis, now docked in lunar orbit, Fleet Commander Eric Shaw received a new order. Not to fight, but to escort. His first mission was to guide a Cathari envoy ship safely through the asteroid belt, a simple task but a powerful symbol. The hunter had become a guardian. Captain Ryan Holt visited the families of those who had fallen in the final battle. He didn't speak of glory. He spoke of duty, of choice, of a future worth protecting. The families wept, but they also stood tall. They knew their loved ones had not died in vain. High above, in the quiet of space, the wreckage of the Council fleet was slowly cleared. Some pieces were salvaged for study. Others were left to drift, a silent memorial to the cost of arrogance. The Galactic Council still existed, but it was changed. Weaker, humble. They called an emergency summit, and for the first time in history they invited Earth to attend, not as a subject, but as an equal. President Brooks accepted. When the human delegation arrived at the neutral station near Proxima Centauri, every species turned to watch. They expected warriors in armor, or politicians with sharp tongues. Instead, they saw men and women in simple uniforms, calm and steady, carrying no weapons, speaking no threats. They sat at the table. They listened. They spoke only when needed, and when they did, the galaxy listened. Within months, a new charter was drafted. It spoke of mutual respect, shared security, and the right of every species to govern itself. Earth's name was at the top of the list of signatories. In a quiet moment aboard the Aegis, now assigned to patrol the outer edges of human space, Commander Shaw looked out at the stars. The same stars that had watched Earth suffer, fight, and rise. He thought of all those who had given everything so that humanity could stand free. He whispered, so softly no one else could hear, "Let them remember what happens when you push us too far." But he also knew the truth. Humanity didn't want to be feared. They wanted to be respected, and now at last they were. The galaxy would never be the same, and neither would Earth.